Okay, so next thing I'm doing, we got to do some body work. Okay, so we got the basic walk happening. Actually, let's just change this back to 25, enter. Basic walk is working, and this just lacks any kind of life. So we got to start thinking about it a little bit. And first thing I'm going to do is grab the upper body control. Now, everything looks okay here when I do this, and let's put this onto 2 viewports so you can see what the hell I'm looking at. And then when I look, the center of gravity is constantly right in the middle. And so when I go to, say, frame 7, the center of gravity is here, and this would make me fall over. If I tried to stand like this, I would fall over. Okay, so what I want to do is pull this over this way a little bit. And here I might even do something just to be fast. Let's hold down X and my grid will snap, and it's like negative whatever. Okay, great. And I'm going to hit S, and then I'll keyframe it. And I'll do the same thing on the other side here. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to snap it over to the other side, and I'm going to hit S and keyframe that. Did it all right. Why does that look weird? Translate, oh, -10, okay, everything's cool. So now when I press play, it goes side to side. Okay, so this is hugely important. Okay, it's the character moving side to side. Maybe a little bit still quite robotic, but whatever, that's okay. Now, as soon as the foot comes off the ground, say around 4-ish, the body really should be over here. So I'm just going to snap this thing over here, hit S. Okay, so now, whoop, goes over, and as it comes down, it switches angles and goes over to the other side. Then I'll go over here, and I'll hold down X, and I'll hit S. Okay, now when I press play, now it's looking a little bit more natural. Still a little bit intense. I'm going side to side quite a bit just to exaggerate and show a point. Okay, I'm just going to pause this for a moment, or stop the animation, and I'm going to go into my good friend, the graph editor. I'm just going to put that on my shelf. If I hold down Control and Shift, I can put that on my shelf, and that's the little icon for the graph editor. Okay, and if I look at the translates here, translate X, I can see now the movement. Remember that along the bottom here, this is your time, and then this is your value up and down. And so what I might do is I grab these keyframes. I'm going to hold down Shift and grab those keyframes. I'm going to grab the scale tool. And if I go to around the middle, I can, well, that's not what I wanted. If I go up and down, I can scale these a little bit. So instead of it being that really intense -10 to 10 from side to side, I've just made it a bit subtler just by scaling those keyframes. And you can see now that movement is still the same, but it's subtle. Okay, and that's kind of what I like to do. I always like to exaggerate and then make it subtle. If you kind of do a little bit, and do a little bit, and do a little bit, and just kind of move it a little bit, it's like you can't really tell what you've done. You can't really figure out if that's the movement you're looking for. So I always exaggerate, and then I subtle it down. I usually crack it down in gaps of like 1/2. So here I've done it just a little over 1/2, so it isn't too much, right? But the movement's there. I know it's there. It exists. Okay, and I'm going to stop. So I got that one figured out. And let's go and do the same kind of thing with the hips. Now the hips, some things to keep in mind here on frame 1, that when this foot is coming forward, this hip is going to come forward a little bit. I'm just grabbing it along the y-axis and pulling it forward. -25, okay, great. 25 degrees. And then I'm going to take it in the Z, and I'm going to do it down like this. So the little hip goes back here. It's as if the hip is kind of pointing down towards the foot a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to press S and keyframe that. I'm going to go to frame 25 and keyframe that. First and last, I'll go to 13, and then I'll, let's take this rotation in Z, and I'm just eyeballing it. Always bad for this. I always eyeball things. What is the rotate Y here? Something like that. do this down a bit. And I'll hit S and I'll press play. See what it looks like. Okay, so now it's not looking too bad. I could try to make them identical. I kind of prefer it when it's not identical on either side, but that's just me. You could do it so it's identical if you thought about it a little bit. Okay. But now we got the movement in. And now there's one other thing I got to think about here is, let's go ahead to say frame 4. Okay, so as all the weight goes from the upper body, it's going on to this foot right here, what happens is this hip cracks. Okay, so it goes up and this other one goes down because all the weight is going on to this one. So I'm just going to hit S, and then I'll go do the same thing on the other side. Let's go and do this, and I'll hit S. And now when I press play, okay, we've got this crazy hip movement here. Let's look at his bum. That's always a sign. If we're giggling a little bit, it feels like I've done something right. Okay, if I'm not giggling inside, if I'm just kind of staring at the screen and I'm frowning, I did something wrong. Okay, and I'm going to stop right here. And so we got that part done. And remember, if you kind of feel like it's too much, later on you can just kind of look at it and we can figure out that, let's see, it's probably a rotation on Z right here. So if I take the rotate Z, and if I took these keyframes, actually if I take the whole thing and I just grab the scale tool, make sure I'm on the scale tool over here, and I hold down shift on my keyboard and I go around the 0 line and I middle click and I drag down, and it'll scale it down a bit so it'll be a bit more subtle. So when I press play, that movement's there, but it's subtler. Okay? So that makes me happy-ish. Then I'm going to go up here to the shoulder control. Now the shoulder control, let's go back to the first frame. When this hip is forward, the shoulder above it, so this is my left hip, this is my left shoulder. The left shoulder should be back. Okay? And it should be back a little bit like this too. They go in opposites, so if the hips are kind of going on an angle like this, you can see here, the shoulders should go on something like that. So I'm going to press S and keyframe it, go to frame 25, keyframe it, go to frame 13. It should be in the opposite. So if I rotate it over this way and then do something like that, S, and then I press play, just going to move back a bit. Now this is pretty heavy-handed up in here, so it looks a little bit funny, but that's what it's supposed to do. Okay, I go here to say frame 4. Now the hip, this hip has come up, and this one here is still up, so that probably means that when the hip cracks, the shoulder should crack too. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. S, and when I press play, now I got this kind of weird, kind of John Wayne cowboy walk. Okay, that's cool. And then I'll just kind of quickly zip into the graph editor again. And I can look at the controls on all of this, and I just grab them all. Oops, crap. I grab all the keyframes, I got them all selected. I'm just going to go and switch to my scale tool. And where's the 0 line? Right there. If I hold down shift and I middle click, I can go in and make that subtle. So the movement's all there, but make it subtle. And now that little subtle thing, that's not looking too bad. Let's just put this onto frame 24. Still a little bit of a tick in there. It's probably because I don't have them exactly the same, and I could subtle it down even more. There's 0, hold down shift, bring it down even more. It looks like almost looks like a weird automatic clamp right there, but yeah, so it's nice and subtle, but it's there. Okay, and that helps it seem more natural. So let's stop that. And then for the back, the last thing I like to do, I'm just going to include the head into this. Okay, so on frame 1, the head typically will kind of match up with the hips a little bit. So if I grab it and I rotate it so they're kind of lined up, I'll hit S and I'll do the same thing on frame 25. I'm just going to expand that, so I got a frame 25, S, and 13 will go the other way. Okay, hit S. and that should be good. And then when I press play, now it's going side to side. It's got a little bit of sass to it almost. And then I'll just take this and I'll kind of level it out. Typically what I do is level it a little bit here for frame 4 when the hips go the other way. Do the same thing here at 16, level it something like this, hit S, and when I press play, okay, so now I got the sassy little head. Oh, it's sassy. I'm just going to stop this, and if I press my graph editor here, again, I can grab all the keyframes, and if they're too exaggerated, just go to here, frame 0, got the scale tool on, bring it back, just bring it back home. Yeah, oops, crap. I want to be around frame 0. When I hold down shift and I middle click and I go down, you want to be right around 0. So now the movement is really subtle. And look at that, you can hardly notice it. Here, let's just do that. There we go. So we kind of see what's going on. If I zoom out a little bit and I stare at it, nothing looks really wrong. Okay, hopefully nothing looks really wrong at this point. And let's stop that. And I should stop this video here.